Pauline Swift and Georgia Nora for Our World Media Magazine, speaking with Mr. Dean Baquet of the New York Times, editor and chief.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this interview with us. I would like to ask a few questions.
Sure.
You're the first African-American?
Editor, I am.
How do you feel about that?
Proud. I am. I mean, I think that it says a lot about the development of journalism. I think it's good for the country. I think but personally, it's something of which I'm truly proud. I've been in the business since I was 19, and I'm 58 now. So you do the math.
Yes. Where do you grow up?
I grew up in New Orleans, and my father had a small neighborhood restaurant and bar in New Orleans, and we lived in an apartment in the back. Before he opened it, he was a postman. And me and 4 brothers and my mother, and we all sort of crowded into this little apartment in the back in New Orleans. And we had to walk through the kitchen and the dining room of the restaurant or the bar to go to school in the mornings. And I had the good fortune to go to Columbia on a scholarship. And at some point, I went back to New Orleans and worked when I was 19 for the afternoon paper in New Orleans, and just fell in love with the profession. I did cops, courts, city hall. It was easy to get jobs in newspapers in those days because every city had 2. And just found it was the profession that I really loved and what I wanted to do.
Was there anybody particularly that inspired you?
I mean, along my career, I've had a lot of really smart and fine editors and reporter colleagues. No one person, but a lot of people who inspired me, or people who I worked with who taught me, people who embraced me, people who made sure I learned the basic stuff that you have to learn as you rise in the profession. No one person, but I would say 3 or 4 really important people in my career. One of whom is the current editor of the Times-Picayune, who's a very close friend, Jim Amos. So no one person, but I've been fortunate to have a lot of people who looked out for me as I sort of rose in journalism.
Would you say you came from humble beginnings?
Oh yes, very much so. I mean, when we first started, my father was a mailman for 15 years, and he quit the post office, sold the house that he had built for my family to buy this rundown restaurant, and we had no money for the first few years of that. By the time he died, it was a successful restaurant. It wasn't rich, but it was a well-known neighborhood restaurant in New Orleans called Eddie's. But for most of my childhood, I would say humble would capture it, yes.
And you said that you started college at 19?
No, I started college at the regular age, 17. I left college at 19.
Oh, okay.
I never graduated from college. I went to Columbia on a scholarship, but once I went back to New Orleans after a couple of years of college and started working for the New Orleans State's Item, which was the afternoon paper in New Orleans, I just was bored and couldn't go back to college. I don't recommend that for anybody else, by the way. But for me, I just had found the right profession. It was also a different era. It was in the 1970s. It's hard to imagine getting a job in journalism now without having finished college. And now it's too late to go back. So.
That era is over with.
Yes.
Well, one of the things speaking of eras, can you tell me one of the challenges that you have had over the years since you started in publishing? Journalism?
There have been a lot of challenges. I mean, I happened to arrive at the top of newspapers as managing editor in the LA Times and editor of the LA Times and now editor of the New York Times at a time when newspapers were not making as much money as they used to. And it used to be top editors could spend all of their time on journalism. I actually have to spend some of my time worrying about the budget. I have to spend some of my time, we've had to lay some people off. We've had to have job cuts, and that's been really painful. It's unfortunate for me that I landed as a top editor after the glory days of newspapers when they were making tons and tons of money. I mean, we still make a lot of money, but and that's a big challenge. Sure, I mean, it's painful to have to lay people off or to say no to people. On the other hand, I think that we're going to manage our way through this period, and I think the New York Times has remained great through it. But that's been the biggest challenge of my current life as an editor.
We're the same age,
Mhm.
and
You look a lot younger.
oh, you look as handsome as could be. So age is just a number. But technology. When we started out years ago, we didn't have all this technology that we have today.
Mhm.
How do you feel about it?
Oh, I think technology is great. I mean, I think that it means that a kid growing up in a place like New Orleans can read any newspaper he wants to. I mean, think about it. When I grew up in New Orleans, if I didn't like my local newspaper, or thought it wasn't fair, or just didn't like it, I was stuck with it. Now I can read papers from all over the world. I can get a broad perspective. I also think it means that that people who try can know the world better than I can get online right now and read about any place in the world. And if you want to start writing or publishing online, you can do it without having, $10 million to buy a printing press. As painful as this period is, as hard as it makes my job harder, it's still better for the world. It means that, whether it's during the Arab Spring, you can actually people can actually tweet and write about what they're seeing on the street, and that's got to be better for the world, right? Even if it makes my life harder, that's better for the world. It means that it's harder for bad governments to do things in secret. It's the best. It will turn out to be the best for all of its problems. It will turn out to be the best thing for the world.
You have received many awards
Mhm.
over the years. Which one holds the dearest to your heart?
Oh, the Pulitzer Prize, of course. I won the Pulitzer Prize in 1988 when I was a reporter for the Chicago Tribune. I don't know where it is anymore, but that of course, because it honored the thing I care about most, which is my life as a reporter. I mean, I've been an editor now for 15, 18 years, but in my heart of hearts, I most care about my period as a reporter and writer.
Because those are like your humble beginnings.
Not only that, they were the most fun,
Uh-huh.
and it's the foundation of all journalism is reporting, not being the top editor. The foundation of journalism is the reporting you do, and I couldn't be a top editor if I hadn't been a reporter.
There was a story that you did. I was reading about it. I believe you was working in Chicago, and you was working with the garbage strike or something pertaining to the garbage and what was going on back then, and you did a expose.
I did a series. I don't remember the garbage thing.
Okay.
I mean, I did a lot of investigative report. Oh, I did some investigative reporting about the garbage industry in Chicago.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was. I mean, I've done. I mean, that wasn't what won the Pulitzer, but I did a lot of investigative work on the garbage industry in Chicago, political corruption in Chicago, and I was there for about 6 years, and that's the period when I won the Pulitzer Prize.
That type of investigation, were you scared?
No. Partly because it's not like reporting in the. I mean, the scariest reporting in the world now is the people who are reporting in the Middle East who are writing about ISIS and whose lives are really in danger day to day. But no, not in the U.S. No.
George?
Thank you, Mr. Dean Baquet.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to continue where my colleague Pauline Swift left off, and I want to talk a little bit about New York City. We have a situation currently where the mayor and the police are at a loggerhead because of incidents in Staten Island connected with Missouri, Ferguson. How do you view the whole situation in context of a new mayor that just came to office on a progressive agenda? Do you think, what is your view on how this issue can be resolved? Because currently we have the situation is a mayor holding on to how he feels that the police has done or not done what they are supposed to do. How would you like to explain?
It's always tricky because I never, I don't know if you know in running the Times, the only part of the Times I don't run is the opinion section, because we keep the news section separate from the opinion. So I'm always reluctant to express a real political opinion, because I think the signal I have to send to readers is that I'm objective. But I would say that, without expressing an opinion, I would say that that de Blasio was, that one of the most important stories that anybody will cover for the next year or 2 years in the de Blasio administration is the tension between a mayor who ran as a liberal, the tension between him and his police department. I think it's a huge story. It's not unlike, by the way, the parallel between, if I were a columnist, which I'm not, don't want to be, the tension between Barack Obama and the military. It's a relatively liberal president and a relatively liberal mayor who find themselves having to govern, having to lead institutions that are often most comfortable run by more conservative political figures. And this is going to be a big deal for de Blasio. It's going to be hard for him. I don't know what the answer is to this, unrest by the police in the last few days. We're reporting to try to get a sense of what he's supposed to do. I'm reluctant to express my opinion for all the reasons I said, but it's a heck of a story, that's for sure.
And just to go to something that is less sensitive, we have last week, actually on January 1st, as Governor Andrew Cuomo was being inaugurated for his second term, the misfortune happened. His father passed away.
Right.
Former Governor Mario Cuomo, who served New York State for third term.
Right.
And I was just wondering, what would you characterize as Mario Cuomo's legacy?
I think he was the last compelling, truly liberal American politician who played on the national stage. I think that he was an open, avowed, unabashed liberal. And I think that he was an eloquent, speaker for liberal causes and a very powerful figure. And I don't think there's been a figure like Mario Cuomo on the putting aside New York, not even his son, who I think would characterize himself as a moderate. I don't think there's been a figure like Mario Cuomo in generations. I think every Democratic president of the last generation have largely been moderates in character, including Barack Obama to a certain extent. And I think that Mario Cuomo was sort of a representative of a different era in American politics, and a very forceful and admirable representative of that era.
I understand that the pinnacle, after he delivered the speech at the Democratic National Convention, it seemed like he was going to make the move to run for president, but somehow he never did that, and people still wonder till his death why not? And I'm just
the
as
best
shocked.
speculation I've seen about it, and I remember I was a reporter for the New York Times, and I was in the newsroom as everybody crowded around the television set. There was a plane on the tarmac waiting to fly him to wherever he had to go to.
Hampshire.
Yeah, to run, and everybody waited till the very last minute, and then he came out and said he wasn't going to run. I mean, I think that. I think that he was a guy who maybe he understood that he was most comfortable in New York. Maybe he understood. I mean, the country was starting to drift more and more to the right, and maybe he understood that it would be hard for him to win. And maybe he just did. But the best speculation I've ever seen was in our obituary, which just said he didn't want to leave New York.
Mm-hmm.
That he loved spending most of his time in New York.
Oh, well. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I wanted to ask something. Having been in the field for so many years, is there anything that you feel you haven't accomplished that you would like to?
I would like to be the editor who led the New York Times out of its financial difficulties and left behind a vibrant, much more financially solid New York Times. That's what I'd like to pull off.
You received
And I have 7 years to do it.
7 years to do it.
I have to retire at 65.
Oh, okay, that's quite good. You received an award as a Trailblazer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, that's really stands out for me,
Mm-hmm.
that you have made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that award?
It was an honor. I mean, I love the thought that, I mean, for me, starting out, growing up the way I grew up in New Orleans, it was unimaginable that I would be editor of the New York Times one day. But I like the thought that some kid who grows up similarly someplace in the country can see it as a possibility now. That's. I mean, maybe when you asked what I've not accomplished, maybe that's the biggest accomplishment of being in this position, is that even if I screw it up, that there are some kids who now see that there are other possibilities open to them. And I think that's, I will not take any credit for that accomplishment, because it's going to be in the hearts of those kids, and it'll be theirs to do. But it touches me that that's the case.
What advice would you give to a young person, male or female, that wants to get into this field?
Don't get too caught up in trying to build a career. Really get good at the craft. Do whatever it takes to get good at the craft. In my case, it was in reporting and writing. Do whatever it takes to get good. I mean, when I started out, everybody told me if you start out in newspapers, you're going to have to be a police reporter. You're going to have to work terrible hours. You're not going to make much money. All that was true. I was a police reporter. I worked terrible hours. I didn't make much money, and it was the most fun I've had in the business. And I was learning my craft. I was growing every day, and it was fun. It was tremendous fun. So my main thing is don't sit there and sort of tick off I have to do this first, I have to do that first, I have to earn this stripe, because you'll sort of miss the fun of the actual process of getting good. You'll get so caught up in what I'm going to do next that you won't enjoy what you're doing now. And in my case, I have to say that I always enjoyed what I was doing at the time, and I never got caught. I never had the ambition. I did not want to be an editor, period. It just sort of happened. I certainly didn't set out to be editor of the New York Times. I just set out to have fun and to be good at what I did. And that would be my main advice. Because if you set your sights just on one particular goal, and if you don't get it, and most people don't, you will have wasted a lot of years where you could have just had a lot of fun.
From what you say, you really enjoyed your career.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, I did.
Would you right now I see journalism is very, media
Mm-hmm.
is a very complex situation,
Mm-hmm.
complex world to be in.
Mm-hmm.
With the new technology and everything that's going on. I know you said that you didn't have a college degree when you started.
Mm-hmm.
Today, what about the young people? Do you feel that
Oh,
it's
you
not-
have to have a college. Yeah, absolutely. You really
Why?
do. Because I think that you have to. First off, you have to get the experience, the exposure that college gets you to other people, to books, to different ways of thinking. Secondly, the American society is based more increasingly on the notion that you have to have a minimal sort of level of education to get ahead. And more, that's a college degree. You just have to, it's like one of those things you just have to get through the door. I don't think that's bad, by the way. What happened with me was an accident, and it was, dropping out of college. I still got, remember, this was a kid, never been on an airplane. I'd never been anyplace. I'd never been outside of Louisiana. So going to college, made me a broader, richer human being, even if I didn't finish. I have a bunch of people waiting for me. Am I screwing you guys up? How much more time do you need?
No,
Maybe just
no.
a couple of more minutes.
Yeah, you can wind
Okay,
it up.
good. I apologize.
My Pauline spoke up on trailblazing. You're a trailblazer. And then on the same vein, think about our president, Barack Obama. He's a trailblazer, the first African-American to be elected to such a high office in the nation, the President of the United States. And now he's in a situation whereby he has to work with a Republican Congress and Senate. And on top of that, there's a clamor to have an immigration bill whereby more more non-citizens, people here undocumented, about 10 million plus, to have them become permanent residents. And so I see the situation as a type of quagmire, which, I don't know, only perhaps, either working together with Republican and Democrats coming together to solve this problem, or the president going ahead with his executive order. I don't know which one. I was just wondering how you see.
I think there's a lot and he's made this clear. I think there's a lot he can do, and he's already started doing some of it by executive order. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Republicans to do something with immigration, to do some sort of immigration measure, because they're going into a presidential election where they're going to have to court a different kind of vote. I mean, they're going to have, I think they know themselves that they're going to have to court the Latino vote, and they're going to have to court the votes of people who think this is a big deal. So I bet you that who knows? I bet you that the Republicans are struggling for the soul of their own party. I mean, there's a huge number of Republicans who feel like they want a deal, and then there's a huge number of Republicans who don't. But I bet you that they meet him somewhere halfway on it, because they'll have a hard time in an election if they don't.
Right. So the future for America moving forward, I know also, just the last question, the presidential election is coming in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And certain names have been mentioned, and today we know that Jeb Bush has started a track,
Mm-hmm.
Which indicates to an extent that he's going to run. And we have, of course, the front runner, Hillary Clinton, and Chris Christie, so on and so forth. That's going to be a big election, and I was wondering, what issue do you think stands out of the whole?
I think the biggest issue, no matter how it's phrased and no matter how it's crafted, is this sort of gap between the very richest Americans and the very poorest Americans. I think that issue is behind everything from Ferguson to immigration to taxation. I think that's the biggest issue. Even if people don't articulate it that way, I think that gap, the fact that it shows itself in education. I think that's like the biggest. I think there are two big issues animating American life right now. I think that's one, and I think the other one is the things that the country did right after September 11th that it's having to have second thoughts about now in foreign policy. That's torture, that's wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, that's in how to manage the Middle East. I think those are the two big issues. Even if people don't articulate them that way, even if they're phrased as something else, I think those are the two big issues in the campaign.
Well, thank you so
All right,
much,
thank
Mr.
you.
Banquet.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate this interview.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank you. Thank you.